Patriots Inactives, as well as some of the moves that we've seen them make over the past couple days. Been a really busy one for the New England Patriots. Reminder, this show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Much appreciation to them. So let's get into it real quick. All right, so first thing we have up on the board is the Patriots Inactives. Jabril Peppers is going to be inactive for the second game in a row. So as we saw last week, the kind of ripple effect of this was you saw a lot more of Miles Bryant playing safety, especially when the Patriots went with usually it's a 3 safety nickel package against base personnel grouping. So whenever the Broncos brought out 2 tight ends or a tight end and a fullback, a lot of the time we'd see Miles Bryant at safety so that Kyle Duggar and Jalen Mills could do their thing closer to the box where they make a lot of their money. Jalen Mills took over as the primary free safety for Jabril Peppers, the guy who plays in the deep part of the field. So I think we're going to see a similar kind of script. We also saw Marte Mapu, who usually in that 3 safety nickel package against those base groupings, a lot of the time he either plays linebacker or he plays safety. Now he's played more in the slot recently, but as we saw last week, the chain effect that happened with all the moves with the DBs kind of moving around was we actually saw more of Marte Mapu at dime linebacker, which is where a lot of people have been wanting to see him get more run because, as we all know, at safety, while there's been a ton of snaps where he hasn't made mistakes, there are a lot of glaring miscues throughout the season when it came to some blown coverages, miscommunications, things like that. So expect to see more of Marte Mapu in that dime linebacker role, with Jalen Mills filling in as the primary free safety, and then Miles Bryant kind of mixing in there as well. And then we also saw yesterday the Patriots actually signed Joshua Bledsoe to the 53-man roster, assuming that was to add depth at the position. Maybe we see more of Adrian Phillips as well. He's been primarily a special teamer this season, kind of mixing in with the defense, but on a very limited basis. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets any more run or what happens there. But considering Kyle Duggar, who is listed as questionable after missing Friday's practice due to an illness, he's going to play. So I wouldn't expect a drastic shift from what we saw last week. But, with Joshua Bledsoe being signed to add depth, we'll see how it shakes out with Phillips and whether Bledsoe's move was to add more depth to special teams in the event that Phillips does play more on defense. Nathan Rourke, emergency third QB, nothing crazy there. Then we have Jermichael Hasty. He's inactive. He was kind of in the mix as a returner before the game last week. Didn't really see him get a lot of action. And Belichick mentioned a few weeks ago that pass protection is really the thing that holds a lot of guys back when it comes to contributing early on for New England. So I'm assuming that, there's something there is the reason that we haven't seen him get any run, despite the fact New England claimed him on waivers and he's been part of the 53-man roster for a couple of months now. Then Kayshon Boutte is going to be inactive due to an illness. Not a huge surprise. He's been active. He's kind of been all over the place. And when he's on the field, he hasn't made a huge impact. So that's really nothing too crazy either. Trent Brown is one of the biggest ones here. He's actually a healthy scratch. Now, he was battling a ton of lower body injuries since he got rolled up on, I believe it was against the Bills back in week 7. He also had, it was a hand injury and was battling an illness. But according to sources, he is actually out as a healthy scratch. He's fine. He could play, but isn't. We saw last week, there were a few plays where his effort didn't really seem to be there, where, he's kind of just, there was one, I think it was a screen or a toss where he was just standing there and not really blocking anybody, kind of looking at what was going on around him. At times I've made excuses for Brown because he's a bigger guy. Sometimes when he gets beaten really fast, it's kind of hard for him to do much because of his size. But I think it's gotten to the point, especially after last week, where it wasn't just the injuries that he was dealing with or, the size limitations or whatever. It seemed like it was poor effort on his part. So I do think him being a healthy scratch for a game that, isn't significant for the Patriots in terms of playoff seeding or anything like that. But in terms of, this is still a game against a division rival where this team is fighting hard to still win games. Him being a healthy scratch, I would think that puts into question whether or not he returns to the team. Also, A to Z Sports, Sophie Weller, who does a fantastic job. Follow her on Twitter if you don't right now already. But she actually mentioned that, Trent Brown said that communications between he and the Patriots in terms of a contract extension or working on a new contract hadn't really gone anywhere. I think Brown said something along the lines of it could have happened throughout the season, but just didn't. So, yeah, I'm assuming that we're not going to see Trent Brown with the Patriots next season. These things can change. Don't want to write anything in stone, but healthy scratch against the Bills in a road game, not looking too likely that he sticks around. Hunter Henry missing his second straight game due to a knee injury. Hunter Henry's been an Iron Man for this team throughout his 3 years, so you know it's probably something significant, or the team just doesn't want to risk further injuring his knee considering where they are in the season, like how we saw Ramondre Stevenson. He was actually put on injured reserve this week. So it's not the same situation. I think they would have just shut him down completely probably if they knew that there was no chance he was going to play. But yeah, he's going to miss his second game. Last week, it was Pharaoh Brown became the primary wide tight end. We saw Matt Sokol mix in as well in some of their base run groupings. And then we saw a lot of Mike Gesicki in some of their sub packages. So just expect more of the same in that department. Also, I missed Andrew Stuber has also been signed to the 53-man roster to add depth at left tackle, with Darian Lowe likely being the starter there. Not a great situation. Obviously, Andrew Stuber really, really struggled in the preseason at left tackle, especially against backups, which is a big red flag. I was thinking that his best spot may be at right tackle or probably even kicking inside as a guard or something like that. So the tackle position is not looking great. And then Sam Roberts is typically someone that we see as a healthy scratch just because they have some pretty solid depth on the defensive line. So nobody's missing. I know Anthony Jennings was someone who people thought might not have played before the game, but it looks like he's good to go. Moving on. Juju SmithSchuster has officially been placed on injured reserve due to an ankle injury that kept him out in the past 2 games after he had a season's best performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers, his old team. Now, obviously, hugely disappointing season for Juju SmithSchuster. Finished the season with, I believe it was 29 catches for 260 yards and a touchdown. Not what you expected from a guy who was pretty much signed, it seemed at least on paper, to replace Jacoby Myers. Now, I was on record as saying that I was a fan of the Juju SmithSchuster signing. I thought he would bring yards after catch ability to Bill O'Brien's offense, which is obviously a huge part of what he likes to do when you think back to when he was with Wes and, you know, the tight ends and Deion Branch. Like, those guys were really good after the catch, and that's where they thrived a lot of the time. So I thought that he'd be a good fit, but as we saw, you know, I also assumed that the Patriots would clear him medically and that he was going to be good to go. But he missed OTAs due to a knee injury. You started to see in training camp that expectations were lowered because he wasn't really producing or making a lot of big plays. And then as the season went on, there was inconsistency with routes. He wasn't always making catches he should have been making. Just plays that you expected a veteran to be able to slide in and just contribute. He really struggled in that department and was not a good return on investment for the Patriots. I'm actually going to go to a chart that our buddy, friend of the show, Miguel Benzan, made at PatsCap on Twitter. Fantastic follow for anything pertaining to the Patriots' financial situations. He made a really helpful chart that kind of shows you where the Patriots are in terms of how kind of what a bad position they put themselves in with the Juju SmithSchuster contract. So, if Juju SmithSchuster is cut before June 2nd, he will carry a dead cap hit of about $12.3 million. If he is traded before that date, it's going to be a dead cap hit of about 5.3. So ideally, you'd like to trade Juju. He's going to have a cap hit of 10.4 million next year. And considering what he gave you this year, and I think this offense is really going to need a fresh start going into 2024 as they kind of rebuild their offense from whatever it is this season. So you want to move on. It looks like the best situation for them would be a trade, because if you cut him, that's a lot of dead money that you don't want to carry in a rebuild. And then, as you can see, if they trade him before the June 1st deadline, he'll carry a dead cap hit of only $2.6 million. So ideally, you would like to see Juju SmithSchuster moved through trade before that deadline to incur the least amount of dead cap space possible. But this is just a situation where the Patriots really put themselves in a tough spot. You don't see them usually give out bad contracts like this. Usually Patriots fans are laughing at other teams for doing things like this. And then you kind of stack it on top of Devontae Parker's deal, which, to be fair, he's had a bit of a renaissance recently with Bailey Zappi at quarterback. Bailey has a lot of trust in him. He's gushed about Devontae Parker. And Parker has actually shown up as a deep threat, which we hadn't seen with Mac Jones for whatever reason. Whether it was trust, whatever, I'm not speculating there. But with those two contracts still not looking great for the Patriots, they're going to have to find a way to just make things work, which is unfortunate that they put themselves in that position, especially for a team that has a long way to go. All right, so we're going to go back. If I can find my right tabs. There we go. All right. And then today, Ian Rappaport released a piece where he detailed a lot of the different things going on around the league with some of the more turbulent situations, whether it's head coach, quarterback, what have you. There were some interesting nuggets about the Patriots in there. So the first was that Robert Kraft has apparently consulted numerous people about how to move forward with the Bill Belichick situation. Now, it seemed like a shoo-in that Belichick was going to be fired, or they were going to move on from him rather, not be fired, as you can see in the note. We'll get to that. But it was a pretty obvious that they were going to move on after the season because the Patriots were just not performing the way you expected. You had the two blowouts, but then, as NBC Sports Boston Tom Curran reported, after the loss in Germany, where Robert Kraft went into the locker room in a rare move and told everyone how much he needed and wanted to win this game because it's an international audience, the Patriots dropped the ball, and that seemed like it was a death knell for Bill Belichick and was going to kind of just be the move or the loss that signed his waivers or signed his papers out of New England. But the team has won 2 of its past 3 games, and they have looked better coming out of the bye week. There was obviously the struggles where you had the end of the Mac Jones era at halftime against the Giants, then they get shut out against the Chargers. But we started to see first half Bailey Zappi was really good in the 2 games after the Chargers game before falling off a cliff in the second half. But last week against Denver was the first real consistently good performance we saw from Zappi. Had the opening strip sack, but didn't have any turnover-worthy plays after that, and actually completed all 5 of his deep passes, which is where I think he's really excelled. Still needs to work on the short accuracy, and just overall protecting the ball more consistently. But I thought especially his pocket mobility and being able to evade rushers and just find space to make throws, I thought was really impressive. So it's an interesting situation now because you don't know if they win out and maybe Bill Belichick keeps his job. Players have gushed about him, saying how much they, want to fight for him. David Andrews said something on the Sights and Sounds at the Patriots Post where he said they wanted to win that game in Denver for him. Jabril Peppers has been outspoken saying he doesn't like the flack Belichick's been getting and saying how well he prepares the team every week. So it's significant how much Patriots players have bought in and not kind of, as we've seen with the Jets, there seems to be infighting. There's things that leak out. You haven't seen that with the Patriots, and that's nothing small. So it's an interesting situation with Belichick, whether or not he's going to be able to keep his job. But given how Tom Brady's tenure ended, Ian Rappaport says that Robert Kraft is mindful of that and wants to make sure that the end of Belichick's tenure goes out on good terms. So he's not going to be fired. It's going to be a mutual parting of ways. If you're a Patriots fan, you're rooting for a trade so they can get some extra draft capital if they move on from Bill Belichick, but we're not going to see a firing. And some of the replacement candidates now, this is what got spicy in the comments. Gerard Mayo, obviously at the top of the list, but he's not the only one. Ian Rappaport also named Josh McDaniels as a potential head coach replacement. People weren't happy about that, and I understand why. Anywhere Josh McDaniels has gone as a head coach, it hasn't worked out well, as we've seen with numerous Bill Belichick disciples. I think Josh McDaniels' best place is really as an offensive coordinator where he doesn't have to be the guy who's addressing and managing the entire team. That just doesn't seem to be an area where he thrives. So I'm hoping that that's, just maybe doing due diligence and not a serious consideration because McDaniels' track record as a head coach is pretty horrendous if I'm being totally transparent. And Brian Flores, who obviously was the coach of the Miami Dolphins, kind of booted out because the organization and him weren't a great fit. He didn't seem to believe in Tua Tagovailoa as a defensive guy. We've seen Tua had a renaissance under Mike McDaniel, someone who did believe in him. But Flores has brought a Vikings defense that was really, really bad last year and made them one of the most competitive and fearsome groups in the NFL. So he's another guy who could be a potential head coach candidate for the Patriots next season. I thought that was interesting. All right, and last but not least, we have to address last night and the Cowboys win over the Lions. A lot of controversy surrounding that game. I had no stakes in it, and as you can see, the Patriots actually moved up to the 3rd overall pick from the 4th due to a strength of schedule tiebreaker with the Commanders, who they lost to earlier this season. They have the same strength of schedule and the same record, but again, because the Patriots lost to them, they move up to the 3rd spot. Now, this is obviously great news if you're a Patriots fan who wants them to get a new quarterback, whether it's Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, whoever you want. A top 3 pick can get you any one of those guys and put you closer to being able to trade up without having to give up a ton of significant draft capital. So that's a pretty big one for the Patriots as well. Obviously, however today's game goes and how games go around the league will determine where they are by the end of the day. But entering this matchup, the Patriots currently sit at number 3 in the NFL draft order. Let me see comments, see if there's anything we need to address. Thank you all for watching, though. I'm going to wrap this up. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.